What if building a new apartment complex actually benefited the environment by supporting biodiversity, reducing noise pollution, improving air quality, cooling the city, and even promoting mental well-being? Well, vertical forest architecture is a way we can do all of that and more. Now, there is a severe lack of these types of structures in my real life, so once again, I am turning to The Sims 4 to live out my dreams of an idealistic, eco-centered society, at least virtually. We're going to be building this residential rental in Tomarang on the 40 by 30 Ro Kaya Rockside lot here because I bought for rent for sale this past summer and I was itching to use it. But also, I love the lush tropical vibes for this build where we'll be literally drenching this apartment complex in plants. Since we are in a hot tropical climate here, I went with a segmented building structure in order to try to maximize the outdoor space to promote cooling, both from the shade offered by having more plants, as well as from increased airflow from cross breezes between the buildings and all the different open doors and windows that'll go in later on. I'm no architect, so I don't know if what I did here would be effective in real life, but in my mind it makes sense. All of the stairwells for these buildings are covered, but still open to the outdoors as I put in the breeze block windows that came with for rent on the exterior walls on both ends of those hallways. Then around the building, I'm working on adding in tons of balconies. These are where the vertical forest part will come in, as these will be filled with plants eventually. Some of the larger balconies will also have room for the tenants to utilize that space as well. I made sure to make these asymmetrical so that they are more functional and self-sufficient. So, for example, when it rains, none of the balconies would be completely covered from the ones above them, and they'll be able to catch water for their plants. Same thing goes for catching sunlight as well. I wanted to put in some big planters at the front of the building here, but for some reason, trying to build them out with half walls was not working properly. Trying to use the custom room tool was also not working for me. So I ended up having to drag out the pre-made floor squares to get it to recognize the room. Once I get those sorted, I go around building out the rest of the ground level planters and stairs to kind of finish up the shape of this exterior. While I work on that, I'll give you all some updates. I am finally back from what I guess was an unplanned extended hiatus. I mentioned that I got for rent over the summer when it was on sale back in July, I believe, which is when I actually built this lot. So no worries, I have not bought any packs recently, especially in light of the upsetting EA privatization sale news stuff. But yeah, I've had this build for a while now. I just haven't gotten around to finish editing the video until months later. I don't even know why specifically it's taken so long to get another video out. Just a bit of everything, I guess, as usual. Things have been busy at home, work, and the world in general. Both some good things and some not so good things. Well, the world stuff is mostly bad, especially in the US right now. But on the good side of things, I've been making friends and spending more time socializing, which is out of my comfort zone, but it is good for me, so I'm proud of myself for doing that. Also, my spouse and I went on a long trip to Japan, which was great. It was a lot of planning and prep beforehand, which sucked up a lot of my time, and I am still trying to get my sleep schedule back on track, but it was definitely a dream trip. And also, it was my first time out of North America too, so that was just cool in of itself. While we were there, we rented a car and drove all over Japan, and it had me thinking about this build, oddly enough. I noticed that there was just so much more greenery everywhere, even in urban areas. Quite a few buildings in multiple cities had green roofs or plants on the outside somewhere, and like every home had a garden, no matter how tiny of a space they had. They squeezed those in everywhere. I mean, there were townhouses down these tiny, narrow streets with like 1 foot of space in front of their home, and they were still growing huge pepper plants and fruit trees. They just used this like netting to tie back the branches to keep it close up to their house and out of the road. I loved seeing this. Yards actually used to be full of useful plants like this before people started wasting their yard space by planting useless turf grass everywhere. I'm also probably a bit jealous because I struggle to grow anything in our shady, sandy, dry yard at our current house. In our last home, I was much more successful with growing native plants and a little garden because we had much better growing conditions over there. But hey, I keep trying, failing a lot of the time, but I keep at it. I'll figure it out eventually. Something else I saw and loved was that in all of the street medians, the road shoulders, and other sort of dead zone spaces in Japan, they seem to just let whatever weeds wanted to pop up there grow as much as they'd like. It may not sound great to some people, but I loved it. It allows you to squeeze in that much more native habitat and creates more visual interest. Plus, the extra plants help collect more water runoff, and they were overgrown but never got in the way of anything to be an issue at all. Not spending all that extra time and money and resources on keeping weeds cut down or killing them off with pesticides when it's totally unnecessary and actually kind of harmful just makes much more sense to me. Plus, it offers so many benefits. Like, why are we not doing this? Just let the weeds be, please. Now that I have the main structure of the build done, I'm working on figuring out the placement for the doors and windows. Again, promoting as much airflow as possible to help naturally cool the buildings was a focus for me here. So I used a lot of those rotating screen panel windows from Eco Lifestyle in this build. We of course have the open hallways with the breeze blocks that I mentioned before. Then on the roof peaks, I used that paneled siding from Snowy Escape because it looks to me like it could be open to the attic space to offer more heat ventilation. On the balconies that your Sims can walk onto, I use the open-sided doors from Island Living to help create cross breezes with the opposing windows. Having water nearby also helps cool things down, so the natural saltwater pool at the center of the buildings and all the little fountains we'll put in later on will also help keep these spaces at a comfortable temperature. In fact, this whole lot is facing the ocean, so I'm sure you'd get some amazing fresh sea breezes wafting into your apartment with all these open doors and windows too. No AC needed. Well, I guess that is the hope. I've never lived in a home without AC, and definitely not one that's been specifically designed for passive cooling, so I don't know how well this stuff actually works in practice. My body does not handle temperature changes well, so I may have a hard time living in a space without temperature controls. Though something designed so much around cooling, like the way some of the traditional houses in places like Thailand and the Philippines are, may actually work great for me. I don't know. If you live in a place like this, let me know how well you think it actually works, especially if you've been able to compare it to living somewhere with centralized air. I am definitely interested to know more. Now that we've got the exterior structure pretty much all set, let's move on to creating our first apartment unit. This is going to be a very small 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. There are 2 tiny ones like this, but I also included some larger 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom apartments as well. For the interior doors, I used the one with the slatted window from Snowy Escape. This may seem like an odd choice, and I'll admit it sort of is, but I thought these looked like they were somewhat open at the top. And since I am all about creating as much airflow in these spaces as possible, I used them. So despite the fact that it is a bit odd to have a window into the bedroom and the bathroom, it's worth it for the natural temperature regulation. Even though this apartment is pretty small, they still have a good sized kitchen. It's even a bit bigger than the living room, which is alright with me. Having enough space to spread out and work in the kitchen is way more of a priority for me than having a big living room. Like, you pretty much just sit in one place the whole time in there, so it doesn't really need to be all that big. Now with this one, the space was a bit tight, especially with it being in between the balcony door and the bar seating, but I still wanted it to feel functional. So I put in a small round coffee table. This gives you a spot to put your things, since there wasn't room for side tables, but because it's round, it doesn't obstruct the flow of traffic through the rooms as much as a table with definite corners would. I also tucked in some poofs underneath the media stand for extra flex seating that could theoretically be pulled out when needed. Moving across the hall, we have the next apartment. This one is bigger as it is made up of the large room that's directly across the hallway as the smaller rectangular room that is attached to it by the outdoor balcony. The smaller detached room will be the primary suite and bathroom, so whomever gets this room will have a quiet, private space that is separated from the rest of the apartment, which sounds really nice to me. In fact, my partner and I would love to have a home eventually where there are detached sections like this for certain rooms. It sounds pretty cool in theory, but depending on what rooms are connected versus what rooms are detached and how far everything is from each other, it could be more or less annoying. If you've stayed in a home like that, let me know, is it cool or just annoying? Either way, it was neat to explore that concept here, because that is definitely not a format you'd expect to ever really see, especially in an apartment. Back in the main section of this unit, there's another smaller bedroom and a half bath. I went with the island living counters in this kitchen to give it a warmer, brighter feel than the darker ones that I used in the other unit. They also match the doors better than the for rent ones. You will notice that I accidentally covered up the door leading onto the balcony that connects the two sections of the apartment. To remedy this, I moved the bathroom over to be next to the front door instead and extended the kitchen into the previous bathroom space. I did like that dining table, but it was feeling too cramped in the living space. So I ended up putting in bar seating instead and shrinking that table to a 2-seater and moving it onto the balcony instead. There are a total of 6 apartment units on this lot. The second floor units all have similar floor plans as the 2 apartments I just showed off making, but they're just furnished differently. The upper level has larger 3-bedroom units. Initially, I was not planning on fully decorating these apartments for unique households, but once I started trying to put in just the bare bones stuff, I ended up not being able to help myself. Unfortunately though, after I did all of that, I then had to redo all of them. So things will definitely look different in the tour later. This happened because I initially made way too many apartments since I did not know there was a limit of only 6 and then had to whittle them down. So yeah, I did not record all of that struggle, but I will give you a look at how the apartments actually turned out in the tour later. I wanted a few of these apartments to have pets, and this one felt like a dog household to me, so I put in a toy box and a food bowl for them in here. The first floor of this complex has all of the communal spaces in it. The first one that we'll decorate is a sort of lounge, entertainment type room. I wanted multiple groups of people to be able to all use this space at the same time for different functions. So on the back wall, I put in built-in looking couches that are separated with a planter to create a bit of privacy. That half wall divider was creating weird lighting issues, and many of the plants I tried putting in there were super dark. So instead I used these candle pillar things from City Living to create that separation and bring in some light. Then I found a bush that wasn't giving me shadow problems to fill in the bottom. Now that is looking pretty cozy and inviting already. In the empty space in front of the couches, I put in a ping pong table for a fun activity residents can do in here. Then on the far wall, I hung up 2 big TVs, one for each couch nook. Having multiple TVs so close together probably isn't ideal, but if people want to watch 2 different things, both with the sounds on, they can just pair up some headphones to the TV that they're watching to make it work. That wall was looking a bit plain, so I framed in the TVs with built-in cabinetry and gave them each a video game console. I love these lotus curtains that came with for rent, and they match perfectly with the lotus-filled fountains that I put outside eventually. So I definitely wanted to use them in here to make these sitting areas feel even more cozy and special. The windows were just getting in the way of that, so I ended up getting rid of them so that I could fully wrap these alcoves in the curtains, and I think it looks so nice. I then used the wooden ceiling beams from Cottage Living to continue that framing around the front to make it seem like maybe you could pull around those curtains to fully close off the couch nooks if you wanted. With that, it is definitely looking like a bougie lounge in here. To finish this space off, I hung up some decorations and a dartboard, adjusted the TV cabinetry a bit, and put up that adorable lotus bow looking void critter decal. It was too cute and matched too perfectly not to find a spot for them in this room. The platforms were giving me some issues with trying to place the rugs, so to fix it, I just had to raise up the platform outside to be level with the floor inside so that then I could place down the rug to the correct height. Opposite the lounge is the shared kitchen and dining area. Since the apartments have limited space, I figured having a big area like this would be great for when Sims want to host dinner parties or cook more elaborate meals where they'll need to have ample kitchen space. This room took way longer than I anticipated to furnish. Trying to figure out how to put those oddly shaped upper cabinets with the windows was a challenge, and I went back and forth on all that so much. Once I got that sorted, it was looking too dark in here with those countertops, so I actually recolored them for the white ones instead. That definitely helped brighten everything up and make it feel more like a shared kitchen space rather than the homier feel that the dark brown was giving. Figuring out what to put on the wall behind the dining table was also super difficult for me. This room is so big and square that it felt really empty even with the kitchen and dining area. Most of the buffet tables and the stuff that I tried putting on that wall just looked way too small for this big of a space. Eventually I settled on having more of the kitchen counters over there with the tea shelves on top. I framed it in with some vertical planters, and that was finally looking like it was the right scale and had enough interest for this big blank wall. I haven't really used that planter table from the Blooming Rooms kit all that much since the styling of it is a bit difficult to fit in most places. However, this vertical force was the perfect fit for that funky planter, so I was glad to have it in here. Speaking of the Blooming Rooms kit, that was one of the kits that they actually offered for free for a time, so don't worry, I did not pay money for that one. With the upsetting news about the future new owners of EA, I know a lot of people are backing away from buying new stuff from them, which I totally get. With that in mind, I was actually thinking of maybe challenging myself to make some builds with only free Sims content. So that would be Base Game, Blooming Rooms, and Desert Luxe. I think some other packs were also free for a limited time, but I don't recall which ones those were. If you know the other ones though, leave it in the comments and I will add those to my list. Would some builds using only free Sims content be something y'all are interested in? Moving on to our next shared space, we have the office. There's some counter seating along the wall where you can work on a computer. There is a big meeting table for people to work together at. Then in the corner, I made a little room with couches for more private meetings to take place in. The last shared room I'm going to show off here is this garden shed type of a space. With the massive amount of plants we'll be putting in later, I'm sure the gardener for this lot will need plenty of space to do all their seasonal prep and plant care stuff. Also, the residents could use this room to do any gardening hobbies that they might have. In the front corner, there's a little greenhouse room where they could have plant propagation stations, or maybe it's where they put all the plants that are struggling to get extra care. I really wanted glass shelves in here so that they wouldn't be blocking any light coming in from the windows. The only ones that I found that worked were the retail ones from Get to Work. They were kind of ugly and short though, so I ended up stacking them on top of the cabinets, and that got me the look that I was after, and I quite like them stacked together like that. Also in this room, I included a flower arranging table, vertical planters, and plant pots so your Sims can get their hands dirty and grow their own plants in here. Two additional rooms that are downstairs that I did not show myself building are a shower room for the pool and a utility room. I'll give you a look at those once we get to the tour later on though. Alright, that's all I'm going to show off for the interiors. Let's move on to the most important part of this build, the landscaping. This is where the vertical forest part comes in, as all of these balconies are going to be chock full of plants. I was initially thinking of going with yellows and oranges as our pops of color out here, but I really like those new lotus plants that came with the pack, and we have a lot of other plants that match that pink, so I went with that as our main color with burgundy as a secondary color. I usually try to stick with just 1 or 2 pops of color in my landscaping to keep it from looking too busy or disjointed. The greens of the leaves are a neutral, so those don't count. So 2 other colors besides green. By limiting the different colors and the amount of different plants, things tend to look more cohesive and curated to me. So what I do for most of my landscaping is I go through debug and pull out all the plants that I think could work in a space and just kind of stick them in a pile. Then I'll go through, kind of pair them up and see how they look together, and then kind of whittle that down to just a handful that I think work best. Then in order to make the selected plants look like there's more variation among them, you can do a few different things. So like size them up or down with the bracket keys, raise them up or down with the 0 and 9 keys, and rotate them to face different directions. So even though I'm using the same few plants over and over, they don't look too uniform and they still achieve a natural grown-in look. As you can see, I am layering in tons of plants into these, and it took a very long time. So I am not going to show myself filling out every one of these balconies and planters, but I will show a few so you can get the gist of it. For the larger balconies, I wanted them to still be functional, even with all the plants. So I tucked some greenery into the corners, then let the centers open so that your Sims can still walk out there and use them for activities. This one I put a meditation stool on, then one of them has a guitar, another has a telescope, and the last one has a cat tree. The cat tree would probably be sort of dangerous in real life, but in The Sims it's safe, and the cats would love the great view that they get. In the central courtyard, there's a grilling and picnic area on the patio, which is overlooking the gorgeous pool. With how eco-conscious this place is, it's definitely not chlorinated. Probably a saltwater pool, I would guess. Though I suppose with the planters next to it and the fountains, you could pretend that it's a natural pool, but that's probably a stretch, as I don't think there are enough plants around it to filter the water properly. Though that is a good idea to try making in another build. I'll have to file that away for later. To the left of the pool is a bar area, which would be an absolutely gorgeous spot to grab a drink at. Then on the right side of the pool is a covered lounging spot, which again would be an absolutely enchanting place to spend a lazy day at. To finish the pool area, I also put down a couple of outdoor dining tables under some umbrellas. There's a bunch of other things I'd finish up off camera, so let's skip ahead to take a look at everything in more detail in the tour. Here we are at the finished Ro Kaya Rockside vertical forest apartments. This place is absolutely covered in plants and it is looking incredibly lush and gorgeous. To up the eco footprint, I made sure to include solar panels, wind turbines, dew collectors, and solar water heaters around the lot. A couple things I added in later on in the back are this little pet area, a swing set, and some garden plots. This outdoor space would be so amazing to hang out at during the summer. With the weather being so cold and rainy lately, I'm definitely ready to spend all day out here soaking up the sun and the ocean breezes. I mean, look at that view. Okay, let's take a look inside at these apartments that I had to rearrange so many times. There are 2 apartments on the top floor here. They are the largest ones, spanning across 3 segmented rooms. Coming through the entryway, you go into the main living space, which has a convenient half bath next to the kitchen. Crossing the balcony, you go into the primary suite. You'll notice some fashion items displayed in this home. I imagine one of the Sims who lives here is a costume designer for some famous movies or plays or something. Then if you take a right at the entrance instead, you go into a little study that then leads into the other 2 bedrooms, which share a bathroom between them. The kid is into acting and the teen is into music. It's a very creative household here. Their balcony has this great cat tree, so their cat is living their best life here for sure. The other large apartment up here I made to be for some chefs. They've got their fancy copper pots and fresh herbs in the kitchen. They're also into wellness, so maybe there's some high-profile vegan chefs or something. They've got quite a sophisticated purple bedroom going on. It's feeling like their adult oasis away from the toddler and in-law. Their bonus room has toys for the little one and weaving for the grandparent. Both their rooms are so pretty and zen. There's even a meditation stool on the balcony. I mean, this is a pretty perfect place to meditate. Moving down to the second story, there are 4 apartments on this level. For our medium-sized apartments, there is this pink and teal one over here. It belongs to a couple of crafty Sims. I'm not sure what the relations are here, but there's no kids in this unit and they like knitting and cross-stitching. The other medium apartment is this green one on this side. I'm thinking just one Sim lives here with their cat. Their second room is used as their studio for painting and candle making. Each of these apartments are uniquely decorated, but I did try to hold myself back from cluttering them up to my usual level, just because this is a big lot with so many items on it already, especially with all the plants. So I didn't want to overload it and cause issues playing here. It runs fine for me, but I do have a beefier computer, so your mileage may vary. Just know I did try to restrain myself a bit. The last 2 units are the smallest ones. This blue one across the hall is where a musician and their dog live. This is giving some major bachelor pad vibes, but it's still looking inviting and lived in. Their balcony has a guitar and some dog toys on it. Then across the way is the last little apartment, which belongs to some sort of a young scientist or environmentalist. I'm thinking they specialize in water issues with all their ocean photos, fish tanks, and pet frog. Those side-step skateboards are supposed to be surfboards, which I mean, why is it that we have skateboards but not surfboards to decorate with? And why can our Sims do neither of these activities? Both of those would have been great to have in island living. Such a missed opportunity. On the first floor, I'll give you a quick peek at the finished rooms down here. This is the shared kitchen/dining room. I love that funky green rug and it fits in so well with this build. Down this way is the finished co-working space. I think this room turned out so nice. I was really not expecting to like an office this much, but it is probably one of my favorite rooms on this lot, oddly enough. Here is the changing room and bathroom for the pool that you did not get to see in the speed build. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it looks nice and it's functional. Across from it is the utility room. This is where the electrical panel and water heater live. Your Sims can also come in here to do some tinkering on the woodworking table. Again, just another solid functional space. I did change the gardening space a bit, so I ended up turning the little greenhouse room into an aquaponics room instead. I figured there were plenty of plant shelves in the other areas of the room, and having some fish tanks could be a cool way to act as if they're providing clean water for all of the plants, or maybe filtering water for the pool. I don't know how realistic that would be, but I like the concept and it looks neat. The rest of this is about the same, I just filled it up with a bunch of plants. The last room is the lounge area. I don't think it really changed anything in here from what you saw in the speed build. It's still a fun room though. Now that is everything. This was a big one, but I am glad I was finally able to get it edited and shared with y'all. As I'm sure you've noticed by now with my other builds also, is that I love creating these community-focused, multifunctional lots, especially when I can go all out with the landscaping and the eco features. So this vertical forest residential rental was the perfect fit for me. I wish there were more places like this in real life, though something this fancy would be so expensive I'd never be able to live there. So maybe not this extravagant, but still with the same core focus on supporting the environment while also supporting community at the same time. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Make sure to leave a comment with what you want to see next from this channel, especially in light of the upsetting EA news. I'm thinking free content builds, but definitely share your ideas with me as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button and subscribe to see more. Remember, be kind to yourself today, and I'll see you next time.